Is AI stealing jobs from workers? Many economists are currently trying to figure out the answer to this question. One of them, Eric Brynjolfsson at the Stanford Digital Economy Lab, has been studying payroll data and came out with a study recently with some really interesting results. He found that AI is having a huge effect, seemingly, on early career workers in AI-exposed fields like marketing and computer science. However, in those fields, later career workers or older workers seem to be doing just fine. I spoke to him and his colleague Bharat about their findings.
Congrats on the paper. Why don't you just start by telling me how long you've been working on it and why it's an important topic to cover? And Eric, you can start.
Sure. Well, we've had the privilege of having access to the ADP data for a while. And a month or two ago, we started seeing more and more news items about how there were changes in the labor market, and there were people disputing those and people agreeing with them. A lot of anecdotes and stories. We didn't really know what to believe. And Bharat just, he did an amazing job. He dove into the data. And at first glance, we looked at the aggregate data and we didn't see much. But he was working really carefully and looked at these different subgroups. Sometimes I got emails from him at 3:30 in the morning as he was plowing through this. He was just very excited. And we started noticing that if you divided it by these different subgroups, there were some very noticeable trends.
Yes, so Bharat, why don't you tell me maybe what are the main couple takeaways from the research that you did?
Right. So definitely something that we've heard a lot about in the media from talking to people in tech in different industries is that they've seen some drying up in entry level hiring, but in the aggregate statistics that we've been looking at, it's been very hard to tease that out, just because it's hard to look at the data with that much fine detail using the available data sources that are out there. So we really wanted to dig into this using the ADP data. And once we found these results for entry level workers in more AI exposed jobs such as software engineering, customer service, et cetera, we found those quite striking and surprising, and we, wanted to get the paper out quickly because we thought this could really have an impact.
So as you note in the paper, there have been other attempts to, sort of track the impact of AI on labor, lots of different papers. But would you argue that your paper is perhaps the largest scale and also the most real-time effort to date?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that this is the largest scale, most real-time effort. I should also note that it's not necessarily a representative sample. ADP is the largest payroll processor, but they don't, statistically go out and check with every firm the way that the U.S. government seeks to do. But we were very fortunate to have this very large, almost real-time, monthly data from ADP, so we could really slice it in fine grains. And I should mention that another co-author of ours, Ryu Chen, has been diving into the data for a while. This data has really opened up our eyes to be able to understand some of these, how these subgroups are behaving in ways that wouldn't be possible for the smaller samples that are available in other ways.
Yeah, so as you mentioned before, Bharat, there's sort of an increasing number of anecdotal stories about college graduates in certain fields really struggling to land jobs,
Mhm.
specifically, I guess, often in the Bay. But it seems like those anecdotes are pretty borne out, or they're strengthened by your paper, right? Do you feel like there's enough evidence to point to a cause and effect yet?
So we don't want to make claims that are too strong beyond our research findings. We encourage other researchers to also dig into the data and tease out what's happening here. I will say is that our findings are consistent with the hypothesis that AI is having this effect, especially for entry level workers. There are some alternative hypotheses. We checked a lot of them that we thought were very top of mind, but we do think that this is an important area for people to research and continue to study. So we don't want to be the last paper that's written on this topic, and I don't expect that to happen. But I will say that our results are consistent with that sort of story. Now, I do want to mention as well that these results are actually not just for college graduates. We're also seeing some evidence of similar findings for people who are in occupations that are not as college heavy, where most people don't have a college degree. So that's also something that I want to call out in terms of our results.
To build on what Bharat said, I mean, we didn't have an experiment out there so we could test, what happens if people have AI and what happens if they didn't. But we did have some very suggestive evidence, and we sought to check out some of the most plausible alternative hypotheses. Is this just a tech hiring boom, overhang that's being worked off? No, we are seeing it happen even outside the tech industry. Is this just remote workers that are changing the way they're working? No, even when you take out remote occupations, it's still there. And as Bharat mentioned, is it driven by college or non-college? We find that it's in both groups. So most of the plausible alternative hypotheses we're able to examine and rule them out as driving these results. It does seem very consistent with the idea that AI is beginning to have a significant effect on the labor market, especially for entry-level workers.
Yes, so the paper is subtitled Canaries in the Coal Mine, which is a very evocative and foreboding title. Eric, what does that mean?
Well, the literal interpretation of canaries of the coal mine is maybe a little bit too apocalyptic, but we do use it more in the metaphorical sense that there are certain early indicators, things that happen before you see it more broadly. And by looking at these subcategories, we are beginning to see some early evidence of AI having an effect. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to die or everyone's going to be unemployed or anything like that, but it does mean that there are some ways to pick up early effects that you can tease out from the data, and you don't have to just look at the overall aggregates.
And just to clarify really fast, the sort of decline in early stage professionals in these specific jobs, it is statistically significant of a drop. Is that right?
Yes, it's statistically significant. It's about a 15 to 16% decline. I should note that there are other places where the employment is growing. For instance, home health aides and some of the other least exposed occupations. We see actually growing employment for young workers. We also see that for more senior workers, things are still going along steadily. And most interestingly, those people who are using AI to augment as opposed to automate their tasks also have a noticeable increase. The quintile that has the most augmentation, that is using AI to boost what you can do, had actually faster employment growth than the average.
Yeah, I thought that part of the paper was really interesting. Can you give me an example of a query that would be automative in nature versus augmentative?
So, for example, things that are more augmentative include tasks such as learning. So if I'm having a conversation with Claude where I'm trying to learn about a topic, that's considered augmentative. Also validating work. So I've already done the work, but I'm going to check it by using Claude. That's considered more augmentative. So examples of things that are more automative are complete task delegation. So format this document in a certain way, or it's basically a one-shot thing. I just put in whatever I need to do. It spits it out immediately. It's perfect. I can use it. And we're pretty much good to go. So those are examples of things that are more automative, and things like learning, validation are more augmentative.
And this ties back to some discussions we've been having. Really, part of the founding of the Institute for Human-Centered AI is this idea that AI can augment or extend our capabilities, not just replace them. I wrote a paper called The Turing Trap, where I argued that a lot of people focus too much on trying to automate and replace work, when in fact, using it to extend our capabilities is often the better strategy.
Eric, you've been studying this field for a few years now. Do the results of this paper, the findings of this paper, confirm sort of your hypotheses of the last few years, or tell you something new?
Well, I think it's fair to say that technology has always been destroying jobs, it's always been creating jobs. We should never expect the job market to just stay completely stable. So in that sense, I'm not surprised we're seeing some effects. Now, what the specific effects are and how we measure them, that's something new that you can only learn empirically. You can theorize all you want, but until you go out and get the data, you don't know exactly which parts are going to be affected. And so it was really striking to see such a sharp effect for certain categories and not others. It was also, I think, a real credit to the folks who did the GPTs paper, Ilandu, Mishkin, Manning, and Daniel Rock, because they came up with these categories several years ago of most exposed versus least exposed. And here we are in 2025, and we're finding that their exact ranking of categories matched very much to the kinds of employment changes we're seeing. So it was impressive that the types of tasks that they predicted would be most affected by LLMs are exactly the ones we're seeing affected.
Yeah, so in the paper, you allude to previous technological transitions like the IT revolution. Do we have enough of a signal to show how similarly or differently this tech revolution is going to impact jobs and labor compared to past ones?
I think it's still very early, and that's why we're getting this data. And ultimately, maybe it's a little self-serving, but I think we need to do more investment in data gathering and getting the kind of information that we have for this. The work that Barack did and Ryu did to dive in deeper is exactly what we need a lot more of. This is not by any means the last word, but it does raise the point that we need to really be aware that there could be some pretty significant effects. 15% to 16% employment change already. It could be the start of something much bigger. We don't know if that's going to accelerate, mitigate, change going forward. And the only way we can know that is with more careful research.
Right. And we want to continue to track this on an ongoing basis so that we can keep tabs on what's going on in the labor market.
How do you feel the AI labs themselves should be digesting your study?
Well, one thing I would love to see is an even bigger emphasis on this idea of using AI to augment work, not just replace it. And so we did see that the augmentive uses were associated with greater employment. And I think over time, if we want to create not just higher productivity, but widely shared prosperity, using AI to augment, not just automate work is a good direction to go. So that was an encouraging sign. When I wrote The Turing Trap, I made that argument, but now we have some real sharp empirical evidence that strategy may be paying dividends.
And I might also just add that it's not just the AI labs who might be able to direct whether their adoption of the technology is more augmentative or automative. That could also be true of companies as they implement the technologies. So hopefully it's informative for both sides of that equation.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think everyone can learn from this that there are these applications that seem to really drive greater employment and hopefully more widely shared prosperity.
Great. Last question. Did you use AI yourself in assisting with this paper?
Well, I can tell you that AI is really good at coding, so I don't think that we could have written this paper nearly as quickly if we didn't have access to that tool to help us write up all the code, double check it for us, even help with some of the writing, honestly. But yeah, I mean, we made heavy use of the technology.
Absolutely, which also reminded us of some of the strengths and as well as the weaknesses of it. So you have to double check everything. It'll give us references. We want to make sure those are real references. We all heard stories about AI hallucinating. But one of the reasons we were able to do this paper quite quickly and efficiently is because we were ourselves using AI. And I think that this was definitely an augmentative use of it. We were able to produce a lot more output a lot faster than we would have otherwise.
Amazing. And when you say the code, is that sort of like processing all of the ADP data and analyzing it, or how were you using it?
Yeah, I mean, generating the figures, cleaning the data, all sorts of things. Yep.
Every time we made a graph, I would have a suggestion, or one of our readers would have a suggestion. Well, what if you did it this way? What if you did that way? And in the olden days, that would have been a real pain. But
Really?
with AI,
Yeah.
we could do it a lot faster.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, guys. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we end this?
Well, we just want to thank all the people who helped with this. It was a team with Ryu and Bharat really doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this, but the whole Digital Economy Lab gave us feedback. We had these meetings. In fact, we have one in half an hour every Monday morning where people give us feedback on ongoing research. We all help each other, and that team has just been invaluable. So we also want to thank the folks at ADP for allowing us to work with the data.